Today, we're diving into one of the most significant trials happening in Hong Kong. It's all part of the massive Hong Kong 47 case, but we're going to focus on the incredible journey of one person, right at the center of it all, Gwyneth Ho.
And this right here really says it all. It's a transformation that perfectly mirrors a massive shift in the city's own history. This is the story of how a journalist who used to report from the very front lines of these historic protests somehow ended up in the defendant's box herself.
So you have to ask, how does that even happen? What were the choices, the ideas, the political winds that could sweep a reporter into a situation like this? Well, that's the big question we're going to unpack today.
Okay, so to really understand this trial, we first have to get to know the person at its heart and the incredibly fast series of events that completely turned her life upside down.
This timeline really shows just how quickly everything unfolded. For years, Gwyneth Ho was this well-known journalist for Stan News. Her live streams during the 2019 protests were legendary, and they earned her the nickname Sister Stan News. But then, just a year later, she makes this huge decision. She decides to run in the 35-plus pro-democracy primary, and she wins. But her official run for office gets shut down almost immediately. She's disqualified. And then, by early 2021, she's arrested under the new national security law. Just boom, boom, boom.
So what would make someone take such a dramatic leap? Well, according to her own testimony, she felt that the protest movement had basically hit a wall. In her mind, voting was the most direct way for the largest number of people to get involved and give the movement a clear public mandate. But for her, on a personal level, it was also about getting a platform to explain her own take on a really controversial idea, Lam Chow.
And this brings us to a concept that is absolutely central to this entire case. It's at the heart of both the prosecution's arguments and her own defense.
The term is Lam Chow. You'll often see it translated as mutual destruction. But as a philosophy, it's a bit more nuanced. It's described as this idea of sticking to what you believe is right, even when you know that you, and maybe your opponent too, are going to pay a heavy price for it. Now, this is a really critical point that Ho made in court. She went to great lengths to separate her view of Lam Chow from the version put forward by Benny Tai, who is a key primary organizer. She argued that for her, it was a personal and conscious choice to resist. But for Tai, she said, it was framed more like an inevitable destiny, a key part of his so-called 10-step plan. And that distinction is absolutely crucial for her defense, because she's trying to show she wasn't just following some grand conspiracy.
And this quote from her testimony, wow, it really captures the incredibly high stakes from her point of view. She basically suggested that if Hong Kong's common law courts went along with the prosecution's definition of subversion, it would be a form of lam chow for the legal system itself. You know, a mutual destruction of these two competing legal traditions.
Okay, so that's her side of the story. Now let's flip the coin and look at the prosecution's case against her and all the other defendants. What exactly did they say was part of this alleged plot to subvert state power?
Right, so for the prosecution, the whole game was about establishing a conspiracy. They argued she wasn't just an innocent bystander, she was a willing participant. And they pointed to things like her being at coordination meetings and signing this document called the No Regrets Pledge. They also zeroed in on her public language, like when she called for turning the legislature into the people's weapon, and the fact that she was at press conferences where people talked about vetoing the government's budget.
But as you can probably guess, the defense saw things very, very differently. They took every single piece of the prosecution's evidence and tried to reframe it, arguing that these weren't acts of subversion at all, but just, the art of politics.
This slide just lays out the two completely different realities that were presented in court. It's fascinating. Take that no regrets pledge. The prosecution says it was a binding pact to cause chaos. The defense? They say it was just a statement, affirming a power the legislature already had. Betty Tai, mastermind of the plot, says the prosecution. Just a facilitator with no real power, says the defense. And that phrase, constitutional weapon? The defense argued that's just normal political talk for things like checks and balances, not some smoking gun for a crime.
And digging into her personal testimony, Ho got even more specific. She said she never even got some of the key planning documents they were talking about. She argued that, yes, vetoing the budget is a legitimate way to pressure the government. That's part of the job. But here's the kicker. She claimed she never even believed the 35-plus plan to win a majority was possible in the first place, because she was sure that mass disqualifications, like what happened to her, were going to happen anyway.
So let's zoom out a bit. Beyond what happens to Gwyneth Ho, or even the 47 defendants, Why has this trial become such a massive, landmark case? Why are so many people watching?
Well, it really boils down to three huge things. First, this case is drawing the line in the sand. It's setting the legal precedent for what subversion actually means, especially when it comes to politics and elections. Second, just like Ho herself said, it's a major stress test for Hong Kong's common law system as it tries to absorb concepts from a totally different legal tradition. And third, whatever the outcome, it's going to fundamentally redefine the rules of the game for political opposition in the city for a long, long time.
So really, this verdict isn't just the end of a long, drawn-out legal battle. In a lot of ways, it's the beginning of a new chapter. It's effectively drawing a brand new map for Hong Kong's legal and political future.
And it leaves all of us with this really profound and honestly really difficult question that goes way beyond just this one city or this one courtroom. Where does any society draw that incredibly fine line between what's considered legitimate political opposition and what's considered an act of subversion?